As the temps start rising, I feel the familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I don't want to waste money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. Thankfully, Quince changes that. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. It finally feels like my wardrobe matches my standards. The best part is that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes, so you get to look good while feeling good. I'm pretty excited that I have upgraded my athleisure wardrobe for this summer. I bought a sweatshirt and a pair of wide-leg flow pants that are two of the softest items I own, and I plan to live in them. So join me in giving your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
So FART, it's an acronym for these features of a freakout. The F is for feelings. Our freakouts are generally driven by our emotions. A and R are for automatic and reactive. So automatic, these freakouts, they might be simmering for a while, but generally the moment of the freakout, it's almost like a switch has been flipped. It can be really hard to get out of it. Not impossible, but hard until you finally calm down. But it can feel really automatic. And reactive means that freakouts are usually in reaction to something, right? And then the T is for your behavior. What you're doing or saying or yelling is too much.
That was Carla Naumburg on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are four experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and author of Act for Burnout, Act Daily Journal, and the Act Daily Card Deck.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and author of an upcoming book on being a better conversationalist and making friends.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, the Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hi, everybody. It's Emily, and I am here today to introduce a really fun and different episode with Jill. So I got to interview Carla Naumburg for her third time on Psychologists Off the Clock, which was why we knew this would be a really great episode. But she has a new book out that is for middle grade children. So it is a little departure from our usual, where we are talking about basically a kid's book rather than some deep thinking, intellectual, psychological idea. So the book is called How to Stop Freaking Out, the Ultimate Guide to Keeping Cool When Life Feels Chaotic. So Jill, I'm curious, what did you think?
Well, I was really interested to see how this would turn out because it's a departure for us. And I have to say, I am so glad that we went with it. And, if listeners want a little peek behind the curtain, we did honestly discuss this as a team. Like, we love Carla. She's an amazing guest. We want to support her. But kids are not our podcast audience. And this is a kid's book. Should we have her on? And I am so glad we did, because I think not only is it's an episode that I want my kids to listen to, but even aside from that, I got a lot out of it, both as a parent who has kids that freak out, but as a human adult who honestly still freaks out sometimes.
We're all still freaking out. You don't
right?
really grow out of it, but you can get better at it.
Exactly. And I loved her tools. And even though the tools are kid focused, and maybe this just says a lot about my own maturity level, but she talks about certain tools or acronyms that are like fart and burp. And I will never look at a squirrel again without thinking of Carla. But they were so relatable and fun. And I think anytime you can make something accessible and playful, it is a good thing, even for grown-ups.
Yep. There's not an age limit to this. But I also think it builds a lot of compassion as parents listening or anyone who's around kids listening, that there's this compassion for the child that may be having a freak out. And if you start to have your own freak out, maybe you can have compassion for yourself. And this is one of Carla's big platforms, is self-compassion for everyone.
Yeah. And of course we all freak out because, as Carla says in the episode, freaking out doesn't usually get you what you want. And that's true. Like usually it ends up making more of a mess, but we do get something out of it when we do it. I've said it on the podcast 1,000 times, like it works or we wouldn't do it. And I think that's important to know for that compassion piece. When we freak out, we get a release or it discharges an emotion. So there's some relief in that in the moment, in the short term. But then of course it makes things messier in the long run. But to really understand, I'm not a bad person because I'm freaking out. And my kid I didn't ruin my kid. My kid's not broken because they're freaking out. These behaviors do have a function in the moment. But if we can learn how to do things differently, we can, avoid that larger mess in the long run.
Right. And I think that's what I hear a lot from parents is they fear that their child having freakouts means they're a bad parent. Mm-hmm. And then what does that do? It adds to their vulnerability to freaking out too.
Well, absolutely. And I'll share a story that happened with us recently. So my son, when he was little, used to have freakouts. I mean, major tantrums literally daily. It was very challenging. And then thankfully, he grew up and matured, and it happens almost never now. But, a couple times a year, maybe, if he's overtired. But the first time this happened after it hadn't happened in quite a long time, he freaked out. And then my husband and I both freaked out in return. And in hindsight, I can look at it and know it triggered our fear that we were going backwards, that it was happening again. We really just catastrophized it, which of course triggered all this heightened emotion in us and then led us to freak out. And guess how effective that was? And
yeah, I can guess.
Right?
Yeah.
It was a disaster. And then just recently, within the last week, we're about to go back to school and we let him stay up late because it's the end of summer. And he ended up having a freak out that next day. But this time we didn't do that. And we let him burn out and we handled it without freaking out ourselves. And it ended much more quickly and easily. I mean, this was a freak out. He said, I hate you. You're the worst parents. But he came to me the next day and he said, Mommy, I'm really sorry that I said that I hate you. I don't hate you. And if I ever say that again, just please remember that I never hate you. And it felt like he could do that because we didn't freak out at him. And just comparing those two experiences, really made it clear the benefit to learning how to handle this in a different way.
Right. Well, and part of learning to handle it in a different way is thinking about it differently. What is the meaning of the freak out?
Right.
It's not that you as the parent are doing something wrong.
Which I think is what triggered us the first.
Yes. That somehow we have set this off again. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Carla is just a joy. This is why we love having her on the podcast. I don't know how many guests you've had 3 times, but Carla is one of them.
Just a few.
Yeah. So I hope listeners get a lot out of this. We did a special thing where Carla and I are really designing it to be listened to with your children, if you happen to have children around. So hopefully it pays off. Carla Naumburg, PhD and licensed social worker, is a clinical social worker and the author of 5 books, including the best-selling How to Stop Losing Your It with Your Kids, and its forthcoming middle grade companion, How to Stop Freaking Out. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, CNN, and Mindful Magazine, among other places. Carla lives in Massachusetts with her husband and 2 daughters. Welcome, Carla, to your hat trick appearance on Psychologists Off the Clock. It is your 3rd interview with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for telling me what a hat trick is, because I live in Massachusetts where hockey is a really big deal, and I hear about hat tricks all the time, and I didn't know what that was, and now I know. I assume it's 3 goals in hockey.
I think that's what it is, too. It's 3. I just know it means
just 3
of
it's
something.
3.
We're going to go with it.
Third time's a charm, so this is going to be like an amazing conversation.
Yes, we're so excited to have you back.
Yay!
So I was just telling you, I've been a huge fan of yours for years, and I read a ton of parenting books. I listen to a lot of parenting podcast episodes, and I just think you have the best sense of humor. of all of us. And that is so critical to parenting. But what I appreciate most about your work is how deeply compassionate you are about the parent experience and helping us be there for ourselves so we can be better for our kids. So thank you.
You know, Emily, that might be the kindest and most meaningful compliment about my work I've ever gotten. Because humor is my coping mechanism, and I'm appreciate that you think I'm funny because my teenage daughters, for some weird reason, don't think I'm funny. I don't understand. It's clearly their problem, not mine, except when it's my problem. But compassion is something I have worked so hard to cultivate, because before I had kids, I was the most judgmental non-parent of parents.
Right. You were the best parent ever before you had your own kids, right?
I just remember thinking, why would people own 3 strollers? We're never going to own 3 strollers. And we ended up with like 27 strollers. I don't know what it was. And like, I had all these ideas about how we were going to do things as parents. And so compassion, and I was mostly, not surprisingly, judgmental of myself, especially early in parenting, when I realized that I wasn't living up to this imaginary ideal I had of who I was going to be as a parent. I feel like compassion and humor are some of my strongest values, my go-to strategies. And it's very meaningful to me to hear you point that out. So thank you.
Well, it makes a big difference. Our world of parenting has too much shame and guilt and judgment. So we need your voice out there. Well, today we're actually here to talk about an exciting new kind of book called How to Stop Freaking Out, and it's for kids. So I'm really curious what inspired this shift from writing for parents to writing for children.
So I've written 4 parenting books, and the most popular one, the one that really landed with parents, was How to Stop Losing Your It with your kids. And as that book made its way out into the world, what I was hearing from more and more people was that it wasn't just a parenting book. It felt like a life book, like how to stop losing it with anyone, whether you're at work or it's your partner. Like, the advice in there, even though it was really targeted towards parents, the advice is useful no matter what situation you're in. So I'd been kind of thinking about that, and were there other ways to share that information? And then my agent, who's a brilliant woman named Jillian McKenzie, said, what if we wrote this for kids? And I immediately thought, that's a fabulous idea, because kids freak out all the time. It's totally normal. It's unpleasant for everyone involved, but it's completely normal. And I think many kids and parents don't understand why they freak out, how to freak out less, or how to freak out less often, less intensely. And so it was really my brilliant agent who said, let's do this. And then I went to Workman, which is the awesome publishing house that has done my last 2 parenting books. And we just had a shared vibe for what we wanted to do. I wanted a lot of fun pictures. I wanted full color. I wanted quizzes and facts and lots of kitty pictures. There's a kitty right there on the cover because I love cats. Who doesn't love a good cat? And I knew that they would let me bring my juvenile humor, my farts and my burps, right? And I really didn't want a book that had what I call the wall of words, where you open it up and it feels, I think, especially for many kids, it's just with a topic that you're not naturally inclined to. Like, if I was going to hand some kid a book that was a wall of words about dragons and everything we know about dragons, they might be psyched about it. But most kids aren't like, yay, I totally want to read about freaking out. So I wanted to make this book really fun. And the feedback I've gotten from people who got their hands on an early copy, and just so you know, folks, by the time you read this, hear this podcast, the book may be published. It comes out on September 10th, 2024. Not that I'm pushing my own book, but I totally am. So what I've heard from folks who got an early review and shared it with the kids is that the kids really enjoyed it. It's funny. It's colorful. There's illustrations. My teenage daughters were the ones who insisted on the quizzes, and they're 100% right. They were like, kids love quizzes. I was like, who doesn't love a good quiz? So the idea really came from an earlier parenting book, though, and then it just translated so beautifully.
Yeah. And what I would love to do today is have this conversation as if adults and their children are listening together. And so this is geared towards all ages because all ages freak out and have really big emotions. And I think, what I've noticed in the parenting world right now and social media and everything is I feel like there's this really unrealistic expectation of if we're parenting quote unquote right, our kids won't have big emotions and freakouts. And there's like something like we're not doing if they do. And I think we're on the same page of completely flipping that to it's actually kind of essential for their growth and development because that's how their brains are learning how to manage their emotions.
Yeah, look, it's 100% true. So to the kids who are listening out there right now, here's the question for you. Is it your parents' fault when you freak out? And don't be like, yeah, of course it is because they wouldn't like let me have a chocolate ice cream for dinner, whatever. Like for reals. Let's be real between you and me. Pretend your parents aren't listening, kids. Is it somebody else's fault when you freak out? That's an interesting question, right? When I'm in a grumpy headspace, it is always my husband's fault when I freak out. In my own brain, that's what I think, right? So I'm talking to the kids still now. But the truth is, it's nobody's fault. It's just a thing that happens. It's not your fault. It's not your parents' fault. You might even say that it's your sister or brother or sibling's fault because they ran into the room, stole the clicker, and immediately changed the channel, which is something my kids do to each other. And I 100% did to my sister when we were kids. But a freak out is a pretty normal reaction to somebody doing something like that. The problem with freakouts is that they're super unpleasant. They feel bad for everyone. They might get you in trouble. They probably won't get you what you want. Like how many times have your parents said, oh my gosh, you totally just flipped out and that was amazing. And I'm 100% going to give you that thing you asked for. Like that, sadly, that never happens. So yeah, to what you were saying, Emily, it's true that people like to blame someone for unpleasant behavior, right? They want to say it's the parents' fault for not setting limits. It's the kid's fault because they're just not a good kid, right? And that one gets me going. I don't like that one at all. And the truth is, this is part of what it means to be human. Like we breathe, our heart beats. In most cases, we have 2 arms and 2 legs and a nose, and we freak out. It's part of the deal. And so I really don't like the conversations around blaming someone or finding fault with someone because A, nobody's at fault, and B, that's not productive. Like, okay, yay, we figured out who's to blame, but that doesn't help us fix the problem. And that's what I'm mostly interested in is how do we freak out less, right? Or how do we freak out less intensely? Or how do we feel better faster after we already have freaked out? That's what's interesting to me.
Right. And I've noticed that if parents, and you get into this in your other book, if parents can depersonalize the freak out and be like, this really isn't about me, then we can handle it in a calmer way too.
Oh, that's so hard to do.
Hard.
Seriously, so my kid, my daughter who's 15, spent 7 weeks at summer camp. And it was amazing for her. Summer camp isn't for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone, but for her, sleepaway camp is her happy place. And she loves it. It's like 7 weeks of a giant sleepover with her friends, and they get to like do all the fun stuff like running around, playing soccer, swimming, going hiking, making friendship bracelets, playing cards, just sitting around and being silly, like whatever. It's her happy place. So when she came home after 7 weeks of being in the greatest place on earth and sat down at the dinner table, she freaked out. She burst into tears and was like, this water glass is too big, because she was used to the smaller ones at camp. Look, she was exhausted. She hadn't slept in 48 hours because one of the things they all do on the last night of camp is not sleep. And not sleeping is like fast track to freak out land. So anyways, my daughter freaks out at the dinner table, right? The glass is too big. And in that moment, it was really easy for me to not take it personally, right? It wasn't about me. It was about this transition from summer camp back to real life. But so many times, especially when the freak out is directed at parents, it's really hard not to take it personally, partially because for so many parents, all we want if you ask a parent, kiddo, let's do a little quiz here, kids. Ask your parent what they want for you. Go ahead. We'll pause. Go ahead. Take a moment. Ask. My guess is most parents said, I want you to be happy and healthy. Okay, healthy, legit. Not something we can always control. I just got COVID this summer, couldn't control it, not always healthy. But, we can do things like healthy, like all the boring things like exercising and moving our bodies and eating our vegetables and sleeping, which not the most exciting, but really effective in staying healthy. The happier one is a problem because we can't control our emotions. We can influence them, right? We can make choices that'll make it more likely we're happy or sad or angry or anxious or delighted or whatever, but we can't control them and we can't control our kids' emotions. And for parents, all we want for our kids is for them to be happy and healthy. So when they're not happy, it really stresses us parents out. It's really, really hard. And when our kids freak out, they're generally not happy. There aren't that many happy freakouts. And then we parents get upset because our kids are freaking out, and then we start to freak out, and then it's like one giant swirling mess of unpleasant emotions, and it all feels bad. And so the goal in those moments, which is so hard, I'm going to say this, and it's so hard, is for parents to try to stay calm even when their kids are freaking out, because everybody knows this. When you're freaking out, you want the people around you to stay calm, because then when they start freaking out, it just gets worse. So yes, Emily, you're right, 100%.
Well, and I can attest after reading this book that it is 100% as applicable to adults as it is to kids. I mean, all of it is the exact same. So I think we're all in this together, and maybe as we're talking, we can think about how parents and kids can help each other in these moments too. Because I hear so many great stories about kids reminding their parent to please take a deep breath. And I love that, our kids can also help us.
Those are amazing stories, because for a kid to do that, it's like a superpower, because kids don't have fully functioning prefrontal cortexes yet, right? This is the part of our brain kind of behind our forehead. It's like the most adulty part of our brain. I think PFC, I think of it as standing for planning, figuring out, and calming down. And when we're freaking out, that part of our brain isn't running the show, right? It's our limbic system that's back sort of above your neck. That's like the old school, hey, stay alive, run away, freak out, do whatever you can to stay alive part of our brain. So kids' prefrontal cortexes are still developing until they're about early 20s. And for a kid to have that presence of mind, that access to those PFC neurons, those little brain cells in your brain, to be able to say to a freaking out parent, can you take a deep breath? That's amazing for a kid. That is like rock star moment. And if I was the parent, to be honest, my gut reaction would be like, don't tell me to take a breath, because that's how I always am. Like my husband will tell me to relax, and I just kind of want to snarl at him or growl at him. But hopefully we parents would also have the presence of mind to hear this really wise advice from our kids and take it. That's amazing.
And take it as a parenting win in some ways.
100%.
Well, okay, you know what? I realize we haven't even defined what is a freakout. So let's start there.
So I think freakouts have 4 core features that they all share in common. And I have an acronym that wasn't just in my kids' book. It was in my adult book too. And I use the word fart. And I picked this word because it's funny and ridiculous. Farts are hilarious. And I want us to remember, even when we're talking about hard stuff, that we can still laugh and be silly. So fart the F, it's an acronym for like these features of a freakout. The F is for feelings. Our freakouts are generally driven by our emotions. It's not like one of us walks into the classroom and drops our backpack on the floor and thinks, it's a sunny Wednesday morning. I think I'll absolutely flip my lid right now. Like that's not really how it happens. It'd be great if it was, because then we could just decide not to. But usually there's a strong emotion driving it. And sometimes it might be really clear what that emotion is. Maybe it's disappointment because we didn't make the soccer team, right? And so we just like kick the ball off the field and stomp off. Maybe it's anger because our parents told us we can't go to our best friend's house for a sleepover, right? So sometimes it's very clear what that emotion is. And sometimes it's not. Like, let's say you have a grandparent in the hospital and you're really worried about them. And then you go to school and your friend like won't give you a cookie from their lunch and you're used to trading cookies at lunch and you just like snap at them. It's not really about the cookie. It's about this strong emotion about worrying about your grandparent, right? So there's always a feeling. That's what F is. A and R are for automatic and reactive. So automatic, these freakouts, they might be simmering for a while, but generally the moment of the freakout, it's almost like a switch has been flipped. So once you switch into freakout mode, it can be really hard to get out of it. Not impossible, but hard until you finally calm down. But it can feel really automatic. And reactive means that freakouts are usually in reaction to something, right? And again, whether it's a thing that happened right in the moment, like your sibling stealing the remote control and running off with it, or something that happened 2 days ago that you're still thinking about, it's in reaction to something. And then the T is for too much, which means that your behavior, what you're doing or saying or yelling or throwing or kicking in that moment is too much. So the example I always give, Emily, is let's say you're a kid walking your 3-year-old cousin down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden your cousin decides to sprint off into the street and you grab them by the wrist. And maybe you grab them like a little harder than necessary, but you pull them to safety on the sidewalk and then they start crying. Okay, so this was motivated by feelings. Maybe you were anxious, scared, whatever it was, that they were going to get hit by a car. Your behavior was pretty automatic. Like you just reached out and grabbed them, and it was reactive. You were reacting to they're about to go into the sidewalk. But I think it wasn't too far. What you did wasn't a freak out because it was an appropriate response to what was going on. It was intense, it was unpleasant, but it wasn't too far. Now, let's say you then throw your backpack on the floor and like make your cousin take off their shoes, because if they don't have their shoes on, they can't run as far, or you start screaming at them, or you insist on putting them on a leash because, of course, in this story, you just happen to have a leash in your backpack. Like all of that might be taking it too far, right? And certainly if you screamed in your cousin's face until they cried, that's too far, and then you're freaking out. So I think we all have these emotion-driven, automatic reactive responses at times that actually aren't freakouts. And so the question you can ask yourself is, did I just take things too far?
Yep. I think that is just such a simple distinction to remember. Was it too far?
Yeah.
So you've already mentioned the brain, but I thought you could talk a little bit more about your use of the safety squirrel. Can you say more about that?
Yes. So my safety squirrel is a way of making sense of the limbic system, which, as I said, is this part of our brain that, it's there when we're born. And its goal really is to keep us alive. Like at the end of the day, that's what it's there for. It's not there to make good judgment or pick the right choice. It's there to do whatever it thinks needs to be done to keep us alive. And I was trying to think of a way to describe this using a cute little furry animal, because everybody loves cute little furry animals, but I wanted it to be an animal that like almost everyone could relate to. So I started thinking about squirrels, because everybody knows squirrels. Not everybody thinks they're cute, fair enough, but we all know squirrels. And they're kind of squirrely, which is a great way to describe your limbic system. So if you ever sit down and just watch squirrels, which I think not a lot of us do, we just see them pass and then we keep walking or whatever, notice what they're doing. And a lot of their behaviors actually look like the types of freakouts, which I describe as fight, flight, freeze, flip out, and fix. So to say that again, fight, flight, freeze, flip out, and fix. So squirrels will spend a lot of, and the reason I like squirrels too is I don't think they have huge brains, and a lot of what they do is kind of limbically motivated. So they'll defend their territory from other squirrels, which can turn into a fight. Sometimes they'll sprint around in a really unpredictable pattern, which I kind of think of like flipping out, like, what do I do? Where do I go? They'll stop and just like hold super still. Have you ever seen a squirrel do that? They'll just stop and like hold really still, as if like, oh, I'm in the middle of this giant parking lot. There's nothing around me, but if I just don't move, nobody will see me, right? So that's freezing. And sometimes they'll just run away and flee. So I haven't seen the fixing behaviors, which in my mind is when we're so upset, but we just want the moment to pass. And so we're like, I'll just give you whatever you want. You can have all my ice cream. You can have my favorite book. You can have my favorite shirt, whatever. Just make like, I'll just do whatever I can to make this moment pass, even if it means giving up and apologizing in ways that I probably shouldn't. So I haven't seen squirrels do that. Maybe they do. If there are any squirrel experts out there, please call in immediately. And so that little safety squirrel doing all that fight, flight, freeze, freak out is kind of like our little limbic system, just trying to keep us safe. But what we don't notice the squirrel doing is, I don't know, maybe they're doing this. I've never seen it. Stopping to take deep breaths, stretching out their body, getting enough sleep, turning on a good song when they need to calm down, making sure they get a snack so they don't get too hungry. Like all of these important strategies that I call burps, because I like silly words.
And that goes with farts. I mean, you got farts. It
totally goes with farts. 100%. Thank you. We don't see squirrels doing that. And so when your limbic system is running the show, that's when you're freaking out. And it's hard to not freak out once you've started, but you can practice and get better at it. But I think it's easier to talk about freakouts if we're talking about cute little squirrels.
Yeah, I agree.
They're fun.
I like cartoon squirrels more than real squirrels.
Oh, 100%. That's very relatable. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to pull out how you use in both books mindfulness and the nervous system. And you talk about these concepts in really accessible ways. So could you say more about the power of noticing? Let's start with that for kids who are listening.
Yeah. So I don't use the word mindfulness in most of my books because for lots of people feel about the word mindfulness the way I feel about kale. I don't like kale. It's like, kids, you know what kale is, right? It's like a green, kind of dark green, kind of lettucey thing that your parents make you eat. And sorry, parents who are listening, but I personally do not like kale. I don't want people to talk to me about kale. It feels like this thing that people force on you because they think it's super healthy, but it's actually really unpleasant. That's how a lot of people feel about mindfulness. The cool thing about mindfulness is that it's not always unpleasant. Sometimes it's a little unpleasant, to be real, but it is like a superpower. So noticing is the core mindfulness practice, which means that you are seeing or smelling or tasting or feeling or hearing something, and you're aware that you are seeing or smelling or tasting or hearing that thing. So you're noticing your breath, and all of your thoughts and feelings, everything's kind of focused on that breathing, or you're smelling something, or you're watching a basketball game or whatever it is, and you're not thinking about something else. You're not doing something different with your body. You are just totally aware. That's all noticing is. It's not a huge deal, but it's really powerful because the noticing part of our brain is our prefrontal cortex. I think technically it's a different part of our brain that is pretty, do you know, Emily, what it is? I think it's a slightly different part, but.
Oh, now you're putting my brain science knowledge on the spot.
I don't have it either.
No.
But the point is, it's not
in the limbic system.
It's not in
part
the
of the
limbic
squirrel.
system. That's what's important.
Right.
And so when you start noticing, it's pulling some of that energy, some of that power away from your freaking out safety squirrel. Right. And it's putting it back. It's like juicing up the part of your brain that you need to calm down, that you need to stay calm. And so when my kids were really little and they were freaking out and I was just trying to calm them down, that's all, I would say, can you notice the couch? And we'd be like sitting on the couch, right? I'm not like, can you notice the penny I hid in the corner? I'm not doing something tricky like that. I'm like, can you notice the floor? Like really, really easy, because all I'm trying to do is engage that noticing part of their brain, start to turn on that part of their brain and take a little bit of the power away from the limbic system. And noticing, the cool, really powerful thing, and this is the connection to mindfulness, is that we're noticing something in the present moment. It's in the here and now. It's happening right here. It's right now. And that is also connecting to the present moment is a really powerful way to get us out of a freak out, to get us out of a spinning brain, whatever it is. And so that looks different for lots of people. Mm-hmm. Some people like to breathe and count their breaths. Some people like to sort of recite a prayer or a mantra or count to 10. And if you're doing that, you have to notice what you're saying and really listen to it, right? You're in the moment. You're saying it right here, right now. Other people like to turn on music, whether it's your favorite song or some like rage anthem or something sad because you just need to cry and get those feelings out. And you're listening to the music. You're connecting with it in the moment. And there's a million ways to do this. But fundamentally, getting your brain out of that place of, I'm so mad at that person because they did that to me then and I'm so pissed and that was wrong, right? That's really focused on the past, what somebody did to you. Or I'm so anxious because I don't know if I'm going to be picked for the school play. Or I don't know, like I'm so worried about this test. It feels really important and I'm not ready. Or I'm going to be the new kid in school and I'm really like, it's scary. That's all future stuff. Right? And when we can say, oh, I don't want to be in the past. I don't want to be in the future. I want to be right here in the present moment. It's a super powerful way to calm ourselves down. So noticing is a power that works to help you stay calm. If you notice yourself starting to freak out, it works to help you like cool yourself down. And if you're in the middle of a freak out, anything you can notice will help like calm that freak out down sooner.
Absolutely. This also ties in to the other metaphor you use in both books, which is buttons and button pushing.
Yes. Okay. So kiddos and parents, I want you to imagine that you have invisible buttons all over your body, right? And they're like on your skin and they connect to the outside world. And whenever you have strong feelings, even really strong happy feelings, but mostly strong unpleasant feelings or unwanted feelings, or confusing or upsetting thoughts. Imagine that sends energy, power, light to your buttons. So they get bigger and brighter and really sensitive. So they're very easy to push, right? And then, so let's say you've had a whole morning of unpleasant feelings, confusing thoughts, and then you go off to school and your teacher says, pop quiz. And maybe on a different day, when your buttons weren't all big and bright and sensitive, push me, maybe you'd be like, oh, I don't love pop quizzes, but I can do this. But on this day, when you've had a really rough morning and your teacher says pop quiz, maybe you just like burst into tears. Maybe you run up to the front of the room and grab the hall pass and run out to the bathroom. Maybe you slam your textbook closed and, knock it onto the floor. You freak out. And that's because your buttons were like real big and bright and sensitive and pushable. And then when your teacher sprung this quiz on you, it pushed your buttons and you lost it. So there are, and maybe, maybe you don't freak out, but then when your teacher says this thing, that adds even more juice, right? So maybe she says pop quiz and you think, I can't do this. I didn't study. And then it's going to bring down my grade. And then my parents aren't going to let me play football and blah, blah, blah. And so maybe it's not the pop quiz that sends you into freak out, but the pop quiz makes your buttons even bigger and brighter. And so it's the next thing that sends you into a freak out. So buttons are really just a way of thinking about how sensitive are we in that moment to a freak out, how vulnerable. And it gets us thinking about what are the things in our life that juice up our buttons? What are the things in our life that calm them down? And what are the things, people, places, events, whatever, that push our buttons?
Right. So I think it's building that self-awareness because each person's set of buttons is their own in terms of what those buttons are, how they get bigger, how they get smaller. So I'm curious, do you use this language with your kids? Like in your family?
No, my kids don't want to talk to me about my books.
Of course not.
No, 100%. But I use it in my daily life in that I think about it a lot, right? Yeah. So my husband's got this smartwatch and it's like an exercise watch. And every day it'll tell him at any moment what his body battery is, right? So if he wakes up in the morning and he had a really good night of sleep and he slept well, his body battery might be at like 95. And then over the course of the day, depending on how much he exercises and how stressful the day is, his body battery at the end of the day, it might be like 5 or 10. And I think about that in terms of like, what's my body battery at right now? And the lower my body battery is, the more sensitive and pushable my buttons are. I don't wear that smartwatch, but I like to sort of check in with myself and think, How much juice do I have in this tank? Kids, that's an old-fashioned way of saying how much gas do I have in my tank of my car? And if you grew up with electric cars, you have no idea what I'm talking about, so just move on. But how much juice do I have? Like, how much energy do I have? And the more tired, the hungrier. If I'm in pain, if something in my body hurts, the bigger, brighter, more sensitive my buttons are, the less body battery I have, and the more likely I am to lose it.
Well, I think kids could relate to the phone battery, cell phone, like the
100%. And
watching
guys,
that go down.
When we are tired, so everybody's got different buttons. Like, for example, if you are a person who's the shortest or the tallest in your class, you might have a button around height, right? And so whenever somebody makes a comment about that, you might feel a little more sensitive, or you might flip out. I'm pretty average height, so I don't have a button about that, but I have a button about other things. And so lots of people have their own unique buttons, but everybody has some pretty similar ones. We all have buttons around how tired we are, like I said, if we're hungry, if we're in pain, if we're grieving, if you've lost someone you really love, or if like a beloved pet has died, that's like it's so painfully sad.
Or a big change, like a life change.
Big changes,
big move,
huge button for everyone,
new
right?
school.
Starting a new school, moving, if your parents get a divorce, anything like that. And for lots of kids and adults too, we have buttons around being different.
Yeah.
Any way that we're different, it can really, that can be a button that can get juiced up or calmed down. But so there are some common ones. Also, a lot of people have buttons around big anniversaries or the holidays, right? Like big days can really be big buttons. But again, everybody has other buttons that are really different. And so just figuring out what yours are. You're never going to get rid of them. That's just the reality.
That's not the point here. Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is to know, okay, right now I'm just a button waiting to be pushed. Imagine you're running to the elevator. You want to be the first one there to push that button, and that button is red and it's right at your height and you can't wait to push it. If you're like that button, then you need to find a way. And I've got a whole bunch of strategies in the book to calm down. And just know that that's a button you have, and that's okay. We all got them. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just learning how to take care of them.
Yeah. So let's get into the strategies, the burps. I was really impressed you managed to fill the entire alphabet.
Oh my gosh, it was so fun.
A to Z.
A to Z.
So we're not going to go over all of them, but do you have favorites?
Yes. So burps stands for button reduction practices. And so these are things we can do that are going to make our buttons harder to push, right? They're going to make them smaller, darker, dimmer, and less sensitive. And I picked the alphabet. I decided to do A to Z 26 because the alphabet is simple, right? These practices are simple. Remembering how to spell every single word you make with the alphabet, not always so easy. Remembering to do our burps at the right time, not always so easy. But with practice, it gets better, right? Just like how we practice spelling and it gets easier and more natural, the more we practice our burps, the easier it is. So some of my favorite ones. Look, B is for breathing. And we've talked about breathing a lot, but here's why I love breathing. It's like sending a text message directly to your nervous system saying, it's okay. You don't need to freak out. I love that. Like just stopping and breathing. I also love breathing because it's sneaky, right? You can do it in class. You can do it in front of your friends. You can do it anywhere. They don't know. They don't know you're like about to freak out and you're trying to calm yourself down. Nobody knows. Another favorite one of mine is I have be idle. And idle means not doing anything. And I feel like for most kids and most parents, we're always in a rush to do something. We have somewhere to go. We have homework. We need to empty the dishwasher. We need to find our cleats, like whatever it is. And sometimes I'll just go sit in a chair on my front porch and just like stare off into space. I'm not doing anything. Sometimes you just need to like lay in your bed and stare at the crack at the ceiling, right? You just need a freaking break. And so being idle is a really good way to just relax and like give your brain a chance, your nervous system a chance to just calm down. We've already talked about noticing, and as for noticing is a great burp, so we're not going to go into that again, but I will leave it with Q is for quack like a duck. And yes, I was looking for a Q word, which wasn't easy, but this is also one I have done, except for I cluck like a chicken. And this is why I do it. Sometimes when your buttons are so big and bright and your body is tense and filled with so much stress and tension and energy, and you just have to get it out and you really want to scream or shout because you need to get it out of your body, you can just make a funny animal sound instead. And so sometimes when I was so frustrated with my kids that I wanted to yell at them, I would like start quacking or clucking like a chicken really loud. And it was hilarious, right? So I was getting these sounds out. Clearly I needed to make a noise. Like I just needed to make a noise. And there was nothing mean or angry about it. It wasn't directed at anyone. And it kind of broke up the moment and made us all laugh.
It shifts the mood.
It totally shifts the mood. And so please, kids, do not be annoying to your parents and walk around the house quacking constantly and be like, the lady in the book told me to do it. Don't do that, guys. Do not do that. But if in a moment you need to get a sound out, you need to get a noise out, quacking or barking or meowing or whatever can be really funny. But again, please don't take it to the extreme. I know you want to. Just don't do that.
That will push your parents' buttons.
Oh my gosh, it'll push them so hard.
Although maybe we shouldn't say that.
We should 100% say that because kids know it.
I know. They already know. They know.
Kids know so much. They're very smart.
Well, and I want to really repeat two things. One is everyone has different burps that work for them. Yes. And so it's really experimenting with all the different choices and figuring out what works with you. And practice. The more doing these things, the noticing even that you need to use a burp, for example, that with practice gets more automatic in the brain.
These are both really important points. So for some people, when they're stressed and tense and anxious and full of big feelings and confusing thoughts, they really want to move their bodies, whether it's shooting hoops or going for a run or stretching out, whatever it is. Other people like want to listen to music. And that's not to say they want to dance to it. Sometimes they just want to lay in bed or lay on the couch and listen to music. Other people like to do something creative. I do a lot of knitting and crocheting, and that really calms me down, sort of the repetitive nature, and not like it focuses my brain just enough that I can't think about other things. I can't think about how angry I am, or I can't think about how frustrated I am, but it doesn't make me work so hard that it stresses me out. Like, am I doing this right? It's just the same motion over and over again, but I have to pay enough attention. So trying all these things, look, I have 26 on here. They're all things that kids and adults have heard of. This isn't rocket science. I don't have some secret strategy here. But most people don't think of these things as strategies that are directly connected to not freaking out. So I want you to think of these ideally not just as fun things you can do, but also things you can do specifically because they're going to help you stay calm or get calm. The practice piece is so important. So I think it was John F. Kennedy, who was a famous president from the 60s, kid, if you don't know who this guy is. And he said something like, I'm going to misquote him, but that's okay. You can't fix the roof when it's raining. And what that means is we don't want to wait till there's already a problem before we look for the solution. You can't learn something new or try something new while you're freaking out. Because remember, the learning and trying new things part of your brain is turned off during those times. It's really not available. So what we want to do is practice these things where we're in a good headspace. And look, some of these, like S is for snuggle. Snuggle a parent, snuggle a cat, snuggle a baby, like snuggle a puppy. Don't try to snuggle a squirrel. That's not going to end well. But they're designed to be really fun. So do them every day. Not only will you feel better and you'll be less likely to freak out, but then when you're trying to use a burp to calm down, because they're really good for that too, you'll just know how to do it. You won't have to think really hard about it or plan ahead. You might want to make a list, right? That's a really good idea. Have a list so that you don't have to come up with it in the moment. But the more you practice it, the better, the easier it will be to do it when you're freaking out, which is what's really important.
Yeah, I think a visual is great, whether it's a list, images for each of the strategies, and kids these days with all their graphic knowledge around how to put those things together could be really fun. That could be a really fun project.
Can I tell you, kids these days are amazing artists.
Amazing. Yeah.
Amazing artists. So guys, the old-fashioned way to make a collage, which I did a lot when I was a kid, was really fun. Go find magazines. Ask your parents if you have any. Ask your neighbors. If you need to print stuff off the internet, you can. And then get a big piece of paper or a poster, whatever, and cut stuff out and glue it down. I know a lot of kids do this stuff online. It's amazing. There's also something really fun about gluing paper to paper. It's really fun.
And then you can like actually put it up in your room and always just remember. It's just a helpful visual reminder. And then your parents aren't nagging you. Did you remember to breathe today?
Because nobody wants somebody else to
No one
remember to
wants
breathe.
that.
Nobody wants that. But the other thing kids can do is, if you're into friendship bracelets, if you're into any kind of bracelet, a beaded bracelet, whatever, wear it. And either, you can get the little letter beads and put a word on there. Like I wear one that says, I think it says relax and reflect. Maybe it says breathe and relax. But there's something about it that when I don't even read it anymore, as you can tell, but when I touch those little square beads, like the feeling of it kind of reminds me to calm down. Or you can just wear any kind of bracelet, or some kids like to keep a really smooth stone in their pocket. And that's a way of noticing. You're noticing that feeling. And it kind of brings you back to the present moment, away from the freak out, and can help you calm down. So that's a really good strategy too.
Love it. Love it. And I think it's good. We've been talking about the brain and how it changes.
Yeah.
And even from younger children to school-age children to teenagers, the brain is really changing. And this stuff gets easier and easier. So I want people to realize, as they're practicing, as you're getting older, this actually is going to get easier and easier. But the better you know yourself, even smoother that process is.
This is a truly important point, because I think when you're caught up in a freak out, it can feel like it's always going to feel that way. And that's such an unpleasant feeling. And everything changes. Look, when kids are 3 years old, they freak out because their toast was cut into triangles instead of rectangles, right? Most 10-year-olds I know don't freak out about that. A 10-year-old might freak out about being, somebody breaking the rules during capture the flag. That's legit. That's fair. Nobody likes it when someone else breaks the rules. Most kids, when they get into high school, that wouldn't push their buttons. But, learning that your friends are hanging out without you, learning that you were cut from a team for a reason that isn't totally legit, knowing that someone close to you lied to you, like those, we all have, and even as adults, many of us would freak out for those same reasons. So the things that push our buttons, the reasons we freak out change. But our ability to manage and notice it also gets better. And partially that's because we're practicing, right? All the stuff in the book. And partially because our brains are just maturing, right? In many cases, we're learning like, oh, that's not as big a deal as I thought it was. When you're a kid, it's hard to be a kid, man. When you're a kid, everything feels like a big deal. In that moment, when you're a kid, it's such a big deal. And an adult might not get it. An adult might say, it doesn't matter, but it matters to the kid. And it's hard. So yes, it'll get easier until it gets harder, and then it'll get harder for a while, and then it'll get easier, and it'll get harder, but you'll be okay.
But you'll be okay. That's the end point, is believing that I can handle this. I think that's the ultimate goal here, is building confidence in when I have a really big emotion or freak out, I can deal with it. I'll be okay.
Yes. That is the most important strategy for any human being on this planet, which is knowing that we can feel and experience really unpleasant feelings, scary, angry, confused, overwhelming feelings, and that we're going to be okay. Because a lot of us, adults and kids, do really unhelpful, unhealthy, unskillful things just so we won't feel bad. And then we have to deal. And the thing is, those things might make us feel better for a minute, but they don't really work in the long term. And oftentimes they'll make things worse. And so a really interesting example of this, some scientist recently, by recently, I mean maybe the past 5 or 10 years, did an experiment where they asked someone to sit alone in a small room for an extended period of time. Just sit there, do nothing, literally nothing. And if they wanted to, they could shock themselves. They could give themselves a shock. And I think the shock hurt, but it wasn't going to hurt them in the long term. They weren't going to die. They weren't going to be injured. It just hurts. Like if you've ever had a little bit of a shock, it's unpleasant. And a shocking number of people in this study chose to shock themselves instead of just sitting there. Because when you get bored, you start to worry about the past. No, I guess you worry about the future. You regret the past. You get confused. You start to feel anxious. You start to feel lonely. You start to feel all these things that you don't like. And so literally, Emily, people were like, I would rather feel pain than sit here and deal with my own thoughts and feelings. And that is very human. It's very normal. I don't think there's any of us that couldn't relate to that, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can practice and make different choices. And I hate to say this, but it all comes back to mindfulness. Mindfulness and compassion are really the strategies so that we don't end up shocking ourselves.
Maybe since this is such an area of expertise for you, talk a little bit about self-compassion for kids.
So when I was growing up, nobody talked about self-compassion. When I was in college, nobody talked about self-compassion, just like nobody talked about TikTok. It just didn't exist. I mean, maybe it was a thing some of us did for ourselves sometimes, but there wasn't a word for it. And then I went to graduate school for a really, really, really long time. And nobody talked about this. It wasn't a thing we talked about. But self-compassion is this idea of noticing when you're in pain, when you're suffering or struggling or feeling scared or feeling hurt or feeling sad or feeling angry, and responding to yourself with kindness, with forgiveness, like letting it be okay, cutting yourself some slack. And the best way I can describe it is, imagine that your best friend in the world called you up and they had had the worst day ever. Like, I don't know, maybe their cat died, or maybe they said something really embarrassing in class and they were so embarrassed and they were so ashamed and they never wanted to set the foot in their school again. Or maybe they broke their mother's favorite vase and it was like her grandmother's vase. Like, they've had a really awful day and they call you up and they're so upset. And what would you say to them? Would you say, oh my God, that's the worst thing anyone's ever done, and you are a horrible person and no one will ever like you, and your mother probably doesn't love you anymore, and like, you are the worst? You would never say that to your best friend. I don't even know you, kids. I have no idea who you are. I don't know you. You're imaginary in my brain. And yet I feel really confident you would not say that. You would probably say, oh my gosh, that's awful. I'm so sorry that happened. That sucks. Your mom's going to understand. She's not going to be mad at you. She might be a little upset, but she'll still love you. And oh, let me tell you about this time I did this embarrassing thing too. Like, we've all done embarrassing things, and like, it's going to get better. Or like, let's hang out. You know, I don't like, that's awful, but maybe we can just go get ice cream or something. Like, maybe we can just go for a walk, or do you want to take my dog for a walk? Like, even if you don't know exactly what to say in that moment, the chances are you would make it clear to your best friend that they weren't alone. They weren't the only one who's ever done this. You still loved them. You still wanted to be their friend, and it was going to get better. So that is, and you're not judging them 100%. You're not sitting there thinking, oh my God, I would never do that, right? But so many of us, kids and adults and everybody, when we have these awful moments, when we feel embarrassed, when we're acting from like our worst self, which we've all done, right? We've all said things we regret. We've all done things we wish we could take back. Many of us respond to ourselves by thinking, I am the worst. Nobody else on this planet is as bad as I am. Nobody else has ever done something as stupid or horrible or embarrassing or unforgivable as I have. And no one will ever like me or love me, right? I'm a bad person. Many of us have had those thoughts, even if we aren't quite aware we've had them. And when we can start learning to talk to ourselves the way that we would talk to a best friend, that changes everything. It's weird to say that, and kids might be like, what are you even talking about, lady? That makes no sense. But when we know that we can literally be our worst selves, and sometimes we just are. We have terrible moments. It's human. And we're still going to be okay with who we are. We're still going to love ourselves. We're still going to trust that the other people in our life love us. And we're going to remember that everybody makes really bad mistakes and really little mistakes on a regular basis. Life is way easier. It's way less scary. It's way less confusing. And we move on faster. We don't dwell on these things forever. self-compassion. And it's actually my C of our burps. I used cut yourself a whole lot of slack. That's my C. Emily, it is, if I could pick one practice or strategy or idea that I could automatically inject into the brain and heart of every person on this planet, it would be self-compassion. Also invisibility, but mostly self-compassion.
Oh, we have gone through so much today. I feel like this is probably our most family-friendly episode. And I hope...
I love that because I love family.
I hope it's a family activity, riding in the car, all those long carpool drives. Is there...
Speaking of family-friendly, can I give a little advice to parents on how to give this book to their kids?
Yes, please. Let's end with that. Unless there's anything else we didn't talk about today that you think we should cover.
Oh my gosh, Emily, you asked amazing questions. This was so fun. So obviously, dear listeners, after you listen to this podcast with your child, they're going to immediately beg you to stop whatever you're doing, race over to your local bookstore and buy this book. That's very clear. That's obvious. On the totally weird and off chance that your kid did not want to listen to a podcast about their feelings and doesn't want to get a book about their feelings, here's my strategy. So as I mentioned, the book goes on sale. It's on pre-order now. It will hit the shelves on September 10th, 2024. What I would recommend you do is buy the book. Totally read it yourself. It's fun to read. It's an easy, quick read. It'll give you a lot of strategies. I read this book to remind myself of what I need to know. And then just leave it somewhere in your house. Don't give it to your kid. Do not. The surest way to ensure, maybe your kids are totally different from mine, but with my kids, the best way to make sure they don't read something is to hand it to them. So, leave it out on the table, stick it next to the toilet, like wherever your kids like to pick up a book, and then don't say anything about it. Literally don't discuss it. If they ask you, where'd this book come from? Just be like, I don't know. Like, just disavow all knowledge of the book. The cover's really cute. It's really engaging. And then when kids open it up, they're going to see like fun illustrations and quizzes. So this is going to grab their attention. And then just don't talk about it. Like if they ask you, if they want to talk about what's in the book, that's great. Talk about it, but don't bring it up. Because we're just, we're trying to plant the seeds here. We're trying to get kids curious, get them thinking about it. And kids really don't want to be curious about the things their parents hand them.
No, it needs to be their idea.
Yeah.
It's on their terms.
100%. And so I think having this book around, don't even put it in their bedroom.
Right.
Don't even go that far because then they'll know. Kids know. Kids are right. Kids, don't you know? And then just leave it. Or, give it to your pediatrician. Give it to your school librarian. Like kids definitely are more interested in advice from other adults who are not their parents. So if your kid has a therapist, if your kid has a coach, if your kid has some other adult in their life that they actually listen to, by the way, kids, you should totally be listening to your parents, but it's not easy. When I was a kid, I did not listen to my parents. Who's kidding? I don't listen to my parents now either. But find an indirect way to get it to your kids because they're just not going to be psyched about you handing them a book about their feelings. Sadly, they should be, but they're not. But then once they open it on their own volition, they will be psyched. I think they'll really be into it. I think it'll be fun and engaging. And who doesn't love a good quiz?
Don't we all love quizzes? I remember like, what were those magazines? Like Sassy.
Yeah. Sassy. I went straight for the quizzes and the most embarrassing moments. I loved those. They were amazing. Amazing. I love those quizzes.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for your time today and for providing this amazing new resource for emotional health in our children. As a child therapist myself and parent, I'm a huge advocate for that. And I really appreciate what you've put into the world.
Emily, thank you so much for everything you do, for the children you treat, for everyone who listens to this podcast. And thank you so much to everyone involved with Psychologists Off the Clock. It's an amazing resource, and I'm really grateful for all of you.
Where can people find you?
CarlaNaumburg.com. It's all there. You can find links to my social media. You can find all my podcast episodes. You can find every book I've ever written. You can find cute but outdated pictures of my kids because they won't let me put new pictures up. It's all there. All the good stuff.
Great. Thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our newsletter and connecting with us on social media.
We'd like to thank our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.